Ready to explore South Africa? We're going deep, uncovering its vibrant culture and history. Oh, and those stunning landscapes you always hear about.
We're using this awesome tourism website, like a virtual guide. By the end, you'll be itching to book a trip.
Okay, South Africa, I immediately think cradle of humankind. Sounds mythical, like something out of a legend. Is it actually that important?
Oh, totally. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Chock full of hominid fossils, millions of years old, like literally walking where our ancestors did. The history there is palpable.
Millions of years, that's crazy. But South Africa's story goes way beyond ancient times. Think about the Bantu expansion, how that shaped the culture we see today.
The Bantu expansion, it was huge. Not a one-time thing, but this slow migration of people. They spoke Bantu languages, introduced new tech, farming, and social structures, mixed with existing groups like San. It was this big cultural melting pot.
Wow, so these early interactions were super impactful. And then there's the rise and fall of powerful kingdoms like Mapungubwe. It reminds you that South Africa isn't just about colonialism. It's got this whole history of complex civilizations way before Europeans showed up.
Right, Mapungubwe, a perfect example. Flourished in the 13th century. They had social hierarchy, trade networks, intricate gold work archaeologists have found. It totally flips the script of Africa just being defined by its colonial past.
It's like uncovering hidden layers of history. But then, of course, European influence comes in, big time.
Yeah.
When the Dutch landed at Table Bay in the 1600s, that was a turning point, wasn't it?
Totally. The Dutch East India Company, they set up shop at Table Bay, just a refreshment station at first, but it turned permanent. And that's the start of European colonization in South Africa. Things were never the same after that.
Like a chain reaction. And the Dutch colonists, they kept moving east, which led to clashes with the indigenous Xhosa people. I imagine those conflicts were brutal.
Yeah, the Xhosa Wars, they went on for like a century. Basically, the Dutch colonists wanted more land. The Xhosa were defending what was theirs. A time of violence, displacement, alliances constantly shifting.
Things were already a powder keg. Then the British arrived, adding even more complexity to the mix.
Right, so the British, they were like, we need this place. Initially, they took the Cape Colony during the Napoleonic Wars. Didn't want the French to have it, but that temporary occupation, it turned into full-on control. Changed the whole region, who had power, who lived where.
Dutch colonists, British control, indigenous groups all fighting for power and resources. Then you have the Embark, a period of upheaval that reshaped everything. What can you tell us about this turbulent era?
Embarking, it's complicated. Widespread disruption, forced migrations, lots of factors at play. The rise of the Zulu kingdom under Shaka, resources were scarce. And then you have the destabilizing effects of those Europeans again. It totally upended things.
So many forces colliding. And figures like Shaka Zulu, they really stand out.
Shaka Zulu, he's legendary. Revolutionized Zulu warfare, went from a small clan to this powerful kingdom. He was a military innovator, a strong leader. People still debate his legacy. Some say ruthless tyrant, others say brilliant strategist.
History is never simple, is it? But let's talk about the Voortrekkers. What made them decide to head inland on the Great Trek?
The Voortrekkers, they wanted out. They were Dutch-speaking settlers who felt like the British were cramping their style. Wanted freedom, independence, new land to build their republics, a mix of religion, economics, and that whole manifest destiny vibe.
The classic pioneer story, seeking new frontiers. But of course, that meant conflict with whoever was already living there.
Exactly. Voortrekkers ran into all sorts of indigenous groups, Indabel, Sotho, more clashes, more displacement. One group's freedom often means stepping on someone else's, unfortunately.
So we've got migrations, power struggles, cultural mixes, then bam, diamonds and gold. Now everyone wants a piece of South Africa.
Diamonds in 1867, gold in 1886, it changed everything. Boom. Prospectors, investors, rapid industrialization, urbanization. But it also made the fight for those resources even more intense. All the existing tension and inequality, it just got magnified.
Throwing gasoline on the fire. This scramble for wealth and power, that's what ultimately led to the Boer Wars.
Yeah, the Boer Wars. British versus the Afrikaners, who were descendants of the Dutch settlers. Decades of simmering resentment boiled over. The gold in the Transvaal, a Boer republic, that was the spark. Boers were independent, they wanted to control their land and resources, resisted the British.
The Boers put up a serious fight, didn't they? I mean, using guerrilla tactics against the British Empire.
The Boer Wars were brutal. The British won, but it was bloody, left a mark on the country. The British used scorched earth tactics, concentration camps. Thousands of Boer civilians died. There was international condemnation.
The trauma must have been unimaginable. And from all this conflict, the Union of South Africa was born in 1910. The former Boer republics and the British colonies all united.
It was a complicated moment. On one hand, a new beginning, but the issues of racial inequality, all that baggage from colonialism, it was still there, lurking beneath the surface.
It's like trying to build a nation out of broken pieces. And within this fragile union, the seeds of apartheid were planted.
Apartheid, this system of racial segregation, officially started in 1948. It cast a long shadow over South Africa, designed to keep the white minority in power, control everything: education, healthcare, housing, jobs, you name it.
It's a reminder that even when you unify, the past can come back to haunt you, shaping history in tragic ways.
Apartheid, it wasn't just, separate stuff or not being allowed to go places. This was about taking away basic human rights, opportunities, all designed to keep Black people down, a system built on racism.
It's just awful, so much suffering. But even with that oppression, people fought back, right? They resisted. The anti-apartheid movement, it was a sign of hope, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The anti-apartheid movement showed how resilient people can be. Nelson Mandela, the African National Congress, they became symbols of resistance. They got people involved in South Africa and around the world, all pushing back against apartheid.
It was a long fight, though. So much sacrifice. But eventually, it worked. Apartheid ended in the early 90s, right?
It did, a huge victory. And then those elections in 1994, Nelson Mandela becoming the first Black president.
Amazing. Out of this dark time, the Rainbow Nation was born. Celebrating all those cultures, trying to bring people together. But how does that actually work in everyday life? Is it really a place where different cultures get along?
That's a tough one. The effects of apartheid are still there, and trying to get everyone to really come together, it's a process. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, makes sense. So much history to overcome.
But there are definitely signs that this Rainbow Nation is happening. Like, South Africa has 11 official languages.
Wait, 11? Wow.
Yeah, it's a way of saying everyone's included,
Yeah.
We value all our cultures.
That's so cool. It shows how diverse the country is. But it's more than just language, right? Like, what about art, music, food? Do they reflect this mix of cultures, too?
South African culture is this amazing blend of old and new. You've got ancient art, beadwork, pottery that's been passed down for generations. And at the same time, you've got modern art that deals with what it means to be South African now after apartheid.
So lots of different influences all coming together.
Yeah, and the music is incredible. Kwaito from the townships, Afropop, South African jazz that's famous worldwide. You hear it all. It's a reflection of the country's energy, all those different influences.
Sounds amazing. If I was visiting South Africa, what's the one dish I have to try? The ultimate Rainbow Nation meal.
Oh, that's a tough one. South African food is so good. But for a real taste of the Rainbow Nation, I'd say try bunny chow. It's from Durban. Basically, you take a loaf of bread, hollow it out, and fill it with curry.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, it's a fusion dish, shows how Indian immigrants have influenced South African cuisine. Really unique, super tasty.
Bunny chow, added to the list.
Yeah.
Okay, enough about food. Let's talk about those incredible landscapes we mentioned earlier. South Africa is famous for its natural beauty.
Oh, you have no idea. Get ready to be blown away. It's a nature lover's dream. Think about coastlines, rugged cliffs crashing into the ocean, and you got those vast savannas. You can see the big five there.
The big five. Hold on, are rhinos one of the big five? Aren't they endangered?
Yeah, they are, sadly. Rhinos, especially black rhinos, they're in trouble poaching and habitat loss. South Africa's got a big rhino population, so conservation is crucial. It makes you think, right, we love seeing these animals, but we've got to protect them too.
It's a responsibility. Speaking of incredible sights, what about those flat-top mountains? The ones you always see in pictures. What are they called?
Oh, those are Kopties.
Yeah.
Comes from Afrikaans, means little head. These amazing granite formations rising right out of the landscape, dramatic, almost otherworldly. And while we're at it, have you heard of the Drakensberg Mountains?
The Drakensberg, yeah, it sounds familiar. Rhyming.
Only the highest mountain range in southern Africa. Part of the Great Escarpment, the eastern part. Huge peaks, waterfalls, tons of biodiversity. It's like South Africa's version of the Alps.
Okay, Drakensberg Mountains on the list.
Yeah.
You mentioned biodiversity. What makes South Africa so special in that regard?
South Africa, it's one of the world's mega diverse countries. Tons of different plants and animals. They've got these biomes you don't find anywhere else, like the Finbows.
Finbows? What's that?
Imagine a place with more plant species than the Amazon rainforest, but way smaller. That's the Finbows. Mediterranean climate, tons of flowering plants, proteas, ericas, restios. It's a plant lover's paradise.
So, amazing wildlife, diverse landscapes and this crazy plant kingdom. It's like stepping into a nature documentary. But let's be real, South Africa has challenges too. There's still poverty, inequality, crime.
Right, that's the reality. Even with all the progress, the effects of apartheid are still felt. There are big economic gaps rooted in that history of segregation. Poverty and unemployment are high, especially for Black people. And crime, often it comes from these social and economic problems.
It's a reminder that even with political freedom, there's still work to do. And climate change, that has to make things even harder.
Climate change is a global problem, and South Africa is right on the front lines. Temperatures are going up, more droughts, water shortages. All of that affects agriculture, ecosystems, people's lives.
It's a lot to deal with. What is South Africa doing to try and adapt to climate change and create a more sustainable future?
They're doing a lot, actually, investing in renewable energy, things like solar and wind power, and policies to reduce those carbon emissions. People are realizing they need to adapt. So there are initiatives to conserve water, develop drought-resistant crops, and get ready for disasters.
So it's a challenge, but South Africa's taking it seriously.
Exactly. It takes collaboration and innovation. It's a journey we're all on, really. South Africa's story, in a way, it reflects the challenges facing everyone in the 21st century. We're all connected. We all have to work towards a fairer, more sustainable world.
Powerful thought, that our destinies are linked. We've learned so much about South Africa, its resilience and its complexity. And it seems like the story's not over yet.
Oh, not even close. Next up, we're going to look at South Africa's political scene, its economic potential, its role in Africa and the world. South Africa is constantly changing, always surprising us. It really makes you think.
I can't wait to dive in. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground: history, culture, those incredible landscapes. But what about South Africa's politics? It seems like things are always changing there, trying to figure out life after apartheid.
You're right, it's definitely dynamic. The African National Congress, the ANC, they've been in charge since '94, the party that fought against apartheid. But lately, they're not as strong as they used to be. Things are shifting.
Interesting. What's causing that? Is it just like the natural progression of things, or is there more to it?
It's complicated. The economy, for one thing. There have been corruption scandals. And some voters, they feel like the ANC isn't delivering. People want to see change, Less corruption, a better life.
I get it. People want to see progress, especially with all the problems South Africa still faces. So who's challenging the ANC? What are these other parties all about?
Well, you got the Democratic Alliance, the DA, they're the main opposition. They're all about liberal economics, less government involvement. They want clean government and focus on individual rights. Then there's the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF. They're led by Julius Malema. He's a pretty charismatic guy.
I've heard of him, yeah.
The EFF, they want big economic changes, policies that specifically help fix those inequalities that go way back, from the apartheid era. They're popular with young people. The ones who are impatient want to see things happen faster.
Sounds like a pretty intense political scene. So how is this multi-party system working out? Is it affecting how the country is run?
Yeah, it's forcing the ANC to think differently. They're having to work with other parties more. Actually, right now, there's a national unity government, which is a first since Mandela. The ANC had to team up with the DA and some smaller parties.
Wow, so things have really changed.
Definitely. It shows how complex things are now. The ANC can't just do whatever they want. They have to compromise, collaborate to get things done.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears to economics. We've talked about the problems, but what about the positives? What are South Africa's strengths? Can they grow their economy?
Oh, absolutely. South Africa has a lot going for it. Their economy is pretty diverse, the financial sector is well developed, and there are a lot of people with that entrepreneurial spirit ready to make things happen. Plus, they've got all those natural resources, minerals, agriculture.
The potential is there. But how do they actually turn that potential into a stronger economy, one that works for everyone? What do they need to focus on?
Education, for sure. And skills training, so people are ready for the jobs that are out there. They need to tackle that inequality, make it easier for people to invest, both from inside and outside the country. And of course, they've got to deal with corruption. Businesses need to feel confident that the rules are fair and stable.
So it's about creating a stable environment where businesses can thrive and people can get ahead.
Exactly. And don't forget about the bigger picture, South Africa's role in Africa as a whole. They're a major player, their economy is tied to their neighbors. They need to build those trade relationships, work together as a region, especially on issues like climate change.
So looking both inward and outward, realizing that South Africa's success depends on everyone around them succeeding too.
Right. South Africa's story, it's a story of resilience, of change, of overcoming huge obstacles. They've come a long way, but they're still dealing with some tough issues. But there's so much potential, so much creativity, and a real drive to build a better future.
It's inspiring, really. Even with all they've been through, there's still that hope, that belief in the human spirit. It's a story that's still being written.
Absolutely. This deep dive into South Africa, it's been an eye-opener, hasn't it? So much history, so much culture, so many layers to peel back. It's a country that keeps you guessing, makes you question your assumptions.
Definitely. I'm leaving this with a sense of wonder, and honestly, I want to learn more. South Africa's journey is far from over.
That's for sure. And for you, our listener, we hope you've discovered something new about South Africa. Maybe you're even thinking about booking that trip now. It's a country that's finding its way in a world that's constantly changing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you next time.